another edition of the Almost Hour. Turn this lively music down for those curious. This is lesser known work by Prokofiev called the Scythian Suite. Wasn't my first pick, but I couldn't find a version of Britten's Guide to the Orchestra that didn't have a whole bunch of nice commentary, but unnecessary by the conductor, who wanted to point out to the audience what should have been obvious from what Britten wrote. This is something that, I don't know, clowns seem to want to do with works that are already perfect as is. Which kind of relates to today's subject. We're going to call this one, well, let's first tell you what the subject was for the artwork behind you. Let me make sure I don't botch it. The inspiration for this artwork was God of the Mind mimes mirrored in hyper-realistic splash art, etc., etc., etc. Well, the AI artist sort of got the idea of mime being about something related to clownishness. AI doesn't have much respect for humor. In fact, most of the AI we have today, with the exception of some of the better efforts of Grok, are really quite humorless nonsense. Just a piecing together of what others have said in a way that it can make sense of without too much work, which is basically how most of humanity operates. And that's why I contend that most of humanity are just organic AIs. Okay, so where are we going with this? I'm going to call this talk Yes and the Power of Improvisation on God's Plan. Now, if you've been following my channel, you'll know that lately it's been focusing on deeply on helping you understand how time works in the multiverse. And that's a rather dry subject, could be, and hard to approach if you're more inclined to be a less scientific in your thinking. So I'm going to try to present the idea in a little lighter vein through what I've learned through improvisation, which is something that everybody learns if they have learned to socialize healthily in groups, communities, families, etc., etc. You've mastered the skill of improvisation. And you may not know that. You may not have a word to express it, but pretty much if you go into any family, into any group of people, any community, organization, you will, and you're asked to point out the ones that are the best adapted to getting things done in that organization, you will find that they share the characteristics of good improvisational artists. Okay, and the first rule of improv, in case you've never taken improv, I would highly recommend everybody take a class in improvisation. It's well worth the time for everyone. In fact, I would suggest that all teachers begin to learn improvisational skills and learn to teach that in your classes, even if you're a science teacher. You can find a way to relate it, and it will help your teaching and your students throughout the course. It will help you learn to adapt your teaching style and methods and content to the needs of the society you operate in, instead of trying to not follow the yes and rule. So what is the yes and rule? Okay, so in improv, generally most improvisational exercises are two people doing something together. Yes, you can do solo improv, which is kind of what a mime does. The mime is creating all of the other characters in their mind. So it still is improvisation. It is an improvisation where you're both improvising your character and the other characters. And this is why the art of a mime is quite challenging. A really good mime is hard to find because they have to create everything out of their own imagination and convey it to you through just their own actions. And this is not easy to do, not easy to convey something that is very touching or meaningful. And so most of the mimery gets associated with clowns like this behind me, who are just going for laughs, who are just doing stupid things to get attention and get laughs. And if you've ever been around a group of thespians, actors, you will find that there are many that are bad mimes. They're basically looking for attention, trying to steal all the attention, trying to steal all the energy for themselves. This is a selfish improviser. And this goes for anybody in any field of endeavor. If you're trying to attract all the attention to yourself, all the money to yourself, all the fame and fortune and everything to yourself, you are a bad mime. A good mime is one who balances what's going on so that the audience gets the maximum benefit. The audience gets to decide what's going on, isn't clobbered over the head with, this is what you need to think, because this is politically correct, which is basically how most of entertainment is today. If you look at the new series on Netflix and Amazon Prime, it's all basically politicized bullshit, bashing you over the head with what you're supposed to think today. This is bad acting, bad mimery on the part of the actors who agreed to do it, because they get paid a lot of money, on behalf of the writers who write this shit, on behalf of the producers who pay for this shit, and on behalf of the distributors, the platforms that show this shit. And it is shit. It is bad art, bad mimery, clownish art, bad stuff. Okay, why? Yes, and is the prime rule of creation. Creation is about taking what is and improvising, making it better. Maybe not making it better, just trying something a little different, because we don't know a priori that what we're going to do is make things better. Okay, so if you take a standard improvisation scenario, you take two actors and you give them a role, you give them a situation, and they play it out. And as they play that out, they can add more things to it. Like, okay, the other character doesn't know who you are yet. So you have to tell them without bashing them over the head, because that would be unfair. You need to give them something that they can react to. Take what you gave, yes, and add to it. Accept what they gave, interpret it through your mindset, and give them back something that adds to it. And this is the crux of good improv. It doesn't have to be funny, but it usually is. Because as we build on what the other is giving you, without subtracting from it, we sort of build this incredible house of cards of incredible additions to a strange story, which very much is like the classic Zen Buddhist story of, oh, we went along and something bad happened. Oh, that's bad. No, that's good. Then this happened. Oh, that's good. No, that's bad. Then this happened. You go back and forth, and it becomes a comical story. even if it contains a lot of tragedy. And this is the nature of good creation. It's all about yes and. Okay, so how does that play out in, there's a lot of people generating a lot of angst right now about the idea of we live in a simulation. The simulation must be predetermined. We don't have any free will. We're just puppets on strings. Or we're puppets free of strings and we can do anything we want because it doesn't really matter. And there's all sorts of nonsense narratives going around that are empowering and enabling a lot of narcissistic nonsense. Either darkly narcissistic in the sense that, well, it's not worth trying, why bother? Or lightly narcissistic, as in, well, I can do anything I want because I'm God, or part of God, or this is all a simulation, it doesn't matter what I do because it's not important. And those are dark places to be for much of humanity. And when they're reinforced by scientists who are telling you the truth, that really gets bad. When you add in a bunch of theologians who are also telling you the truth, and just as confused and out to lunch as the scientists, you've got a recipe for a pretty dark dystopian world, which I think everybody agrees describes the world we're in right now. Okay, how did we get here? And what's the point of it? Well, here we need to back up a little bit and I will explain to you how creation works, how time works, in a way that hopefully you can understand better. So let's go over here. Let's take a look. This is a slide I show a lot because it's basically showing you the 5 main forces in creation. Forces being souls. Souls being quanta of consciousness, thought. Okay? Now, the God thought is the thought that thought up these other thoughts and put them together in a functional way to achieve creation. Okay, and creation is a simulation. It's a simulation using these 5 primordial containers, if you will. These 5 universes. Okay? God's universe is God's private experimentation ground. Okay? God experimented with all these other souls before allowing them to get out in the wild, if you will. Okay? God's universe is the ultimate petri dish. No one can see into it. You can only view the mind of God through what gets out of it as a creation that's shared. Okay? Because God doesn't want to spread a bunch of bad ideas. God's had as many bad ideas as anybody else, probably more. That's why he organized creation like this. Okay, so the basic story of creation is that version 1 of creation was all simulated in God's mind using these 5 principal characters. The role of karma is basically, in this initial version of creation, was to capture good ideas, things that work, things that furthered the simulation. And at this point, basically the whole idea of creation was for creation to work, basically expand and grow and not collapse in on itself or not become stagnant and stop progressing. Okay? If you're going to have a collector of good ideas, well, you probably want to have a collector of bad ideas too. Because bad ideas might be useful. It may be just a good idea that hasn't found a right use yet. And that was essentially the first version of Borg. Anything didn't go to Karma went to Borg. Okay, then you need a test bed. You actually need two test beds because you've got to have one that's fed by the good ideas and one that's fed by the bad ideas. And creating sort of a competition between good ideas and bad ideas. Bad ideas may be just not things that have been made to work yet. So the bad ideas are always trying to creep into the place of the good ideas and change it. This is where you need adversaries. And just as Borg is kind of the adversary of Karma, Lilith, this principle, is the adversary of Lucifer. And all of them, at one time or another, could be the adversaries of God. Because given that eventually these souls are given free will, the ability to choose, they can deviate from God's plan. And this is how the plan evolves. So basically, God plays a version of the game. Played the first version of the game with these 5. Creating the first, letting them play out with non-player characters. Karma is a non-player character. It's an AI at this point. That's no free will. Borg is a non-player character. It's an AI. The only free will souls, the ones that could deviate from the plan, are Lucifer and Lilith. And the interesting parts of the game playing out, the simulation, is when it can play to conclusion, where both Lucifer and Lilith are basically stumped by the cleverness of the AIs. In other words, you get a convergence of the simulation, no matter what free will happens around it. And this is basically how you converge on a new prime timeline, a new version of the prime universe, which is, again, this universe of testing of good ideas. In the process, you might generate more universes of, well, maybe not good ideas, but ideas that serve some function that is outside of this creative perfection, creeping perfection, if you will. And that's how other universes developed as this game was played. And that's why we have a multiverse. We don't have a single universe. I'm sorry, you cannot explain all of the phenomena we observe in human experience, all the phenomena we observe in the quantum world, etc., with a single universe. It's impossible. There are some scientists that still believe that, some theologians that still believe that. They're nonsense. They are absolute dyed-in-the-wool fools, mimes in clown costume, who refuse to accept key pieces of information that are proven, that are demonstrable, that are repeatable. Okay, so the first version of this creation game centered on developing pieces to play with. And what pieces do you need to play with if you're going to build a playground? Well, when we started developing video games, the most simple video game, the first video game I remember ever playing, was called Pong. It was basically a little square ball that had as its task to move back and forth up and down the screen, so long as two other pieces of longer rectangle were able to get in front of it and hit it, and depending on how close to the center they hit it, it would go in a straight pattern or a normal reflection, or it could be made to change angle. And the game was basically like a very, very simple version of tennis, where you try to keep the ball in play as long as possible and you score when you get the puck or ball across the other line. This is the most fundamental video game, and it actually mirrors the most fundamental games of the first universe, the first law-abiding universe, let's say. Because Lucifer's universe is about laws. It's about testing and refining laws, the physical laws of physics and chemistry. These other universes are not law-abiding. They may be, but they are basically allowed to adhere to whatever the law is imposed by their owner, whoever set out as the creator of that universe. Okay? And this is the point at which monotheism is nonsense. Partial nonsense. There is a God, but there are many gods of many universes. And in fact, God's universe is one that you're not likely to ever occupy. Why? Because you've got to meet the requirements of getting in there. And God's universe doesn't obey all the laws. God's universe does whatever it wants to. Lucifer's universe is tasked with obeying laws. This was basically Lucifer's punishment for defying God so many times before this game went public. Okay, so Lucifer's been playing this game a long time, played it before there was any creation, played it in the mind of God as a free agent, the first creation that had free will. The second creation that had free will was Lilith, and Lilith was actually Lucifer's brainchild, thinking, oh, okay, if I had an assistant, like God created me as his assistant, then I could beat God. It'd be 2 against 1. Because nobody had much respect for the AI souls, the NPCs. Oh, we're all way ahead of them because we can think for ourselves. Little did they know that the longer the game went on, the more power actually the non-player characters had. And the more they realized that they had a role to play in the game. Okay, so the upshot of this is, what happens when we converge on a singularity? Okay, the idea of a singularity, as understood by many scientists and researchers, is not what they think. It's not a point. The Big Bang didn't start from a point. That's nonsense. That's absurd. It started from a completed simulation. A version of the multiverse that had a certain extent in space-time, a certain number of universes with their own space-time extent and their own set of laws that converged on a solution that met the requirements of that phase of creation. This is how simulations work. We don't simulate to converge on a singularity. When you're simulating a new processor, a new organization, you don't want a singularity, you want something that converges on functionality. Doesn't dissolve to nothing, doesn't collapse into nothing. Hits at least a steady state. And if you hit a steady state, then you say, well, okay, we at least got that far. Or an oscillating state even. Maybe not steady, but something that is stable. Okay, and this is where the Eastern religions kind of got lost in the weeds of saying, well, this stability is good enough. Let's keep it cyclical. Let's not keep doing a better creation because we don't think we can improve on this. That's maybe true if you're part of the elite that run everything. If you're one of the gods, if you're one of the gods' favorites in a particular universe or spot in the multiverse, doesn't do much for the ones that are stuck being the peons, being oppressed forever and ever and ever, and being used as pawns to keep this cyclical game going. And a lot of the energy of the cyclical game in this species has been racial and sexual. Those two pieces of nonsense identity have been what the adversary, and the real adversary is this primordial force of Lilith. Okay? This soul has a world of resentment against her daddy and her granddaddy. I say her because Lilith tends to identify with the female, tends to play the victim, tends to want to be the weak one that, oh, I'm so sad, I'm so sorry, I'm so oppressed. You may know quite a few Liliths in your circle today who keep playing the sex card to get their way in relationships, in organizations, etc., etc. Now, that's not to say that there aren't males that do that too, and there certainly are Lilithian males who do the male version of playing the sex card with domination games, with overt narcissist games. The female narcissist is more of a covert narcissist. Gets sympathy from everybody. Oh, no, he hit me, he hurt me. Oh, it's so bad, go hit him. Have you ever seen that happen in an organization? In your church? In your family? I bet you have. Okay, so these Lilithian souls are troublemakers. They're constantly looking for ways to improve their position because they don't value the system. They want to destroy the system and use it for their own benefit. They're selfish souls. Now, we're all selfish to some extent. Every one of us has a bit of narcissism in our nature. How far we will take it is a measure of how much of the influence of karma and God we have in our spiritual DNA. And this is going in a different direction than I want to go for this talk. I talk about it elsewhere, but there are basically two sources of our lineage. One is DNA and the other is spirit. And as a human, as incarnated soul in a soul vehicle that has a spiritual nature, both of them come into play. If you didn't have a spiritual nature, if you were a beast, then you would be getting only a DNA influence. You would be operating like an animal based upon your natural instincts, what was programmed into your soul vehicle, and not having a sense of individual identity, individual purpose, other than the purpose of surviving and reproducing, which is designed into DNA. Okay? Beast souls are not altruistic. They will not sacrifice themselves to save others. Now that's will get you wondering, well, aren't there some beasts that then aren't beasts? Yes, absolutely. There are animals who are spiritual in their own way. There are plants who are spiritual in their own way. They will sacrifice themselves for others. In fact, most of them are in their own way. This is why it's not a sin to eat meat. It's a sin not to appreciate it. It's a sin not to thank the individual that sacrificed their soul vehicle to feed you and to wish them well in their next incarnation. This is why we have a prayer of thanks for a meal, not to God. God didn't give you the meal. Not directly, anyway. The meal gave itself to you. The plants grew for your benefit. The animals survived for your benefit. Thank them, not God. Yeah, and this kind of brings back an improvisational aspect of consumption, okay? If you take the idea that everything is here for humanity's benefit, which is basically a very dark Christian point of view. Oh, God put everything down here because we're God's favorites. Well, there is some truth to that, but God doesn't have any favoritism for gluttons, for pushy people, for nasty people, for greedy people, insensitive people. That's not what it's all about. If you have the idea that you're somehow entitled to anything just because of who you are, what you are, I'm sorry, you're in error. You're committing a sin. Nobody's entitled to anything. You can earn benefits through spiritual acts, through karmically positive acts. And this then will get us back to, okay, so if each version, let's just talk in terms of this one physical universe now. Let's get back to what everybody's used to dealing with. Okay, each version had a certain end point, a goal. Initially, the goal was to basically develop a stable system. The stable system would be a space-time that did not collapse. That's a pretty reasonable first approximation goal. That goal was achieved by developing the laws necessary to form stars, form galaxies, and basically keep those galaxies and stars running for long enough that the family who were playing this game got tired of playing that game. Imagine if you were stuck playing Pong every day, 12, 14 hours a day. It would become a chore, not a joy. And joy, happiness, happens to be a goal of this whole game, because unhappy souls are corruptible souls, our dangerous souls, our Lilithian souls. We don't want to become the adversaries of God. It's not a happy place to be. Might be a place you could say you had some happiness in some perverse, sadistic, masochistic way, but that's a perverted happiness. Anybody who takes pleasure in pain, giving or receiving pain, is a warped and dysfunctional, corrupt soul. That's not what we want. You're not entitled to that. That is not your right. Sorry, that's not how it works. Because you will make others unhappy. You will abuse and take advantage of others if you are a soul like that. We don't want you to be around us. You can go live with Lilith. You can go live in one of these dark, hellish universes and not be welcomed back. And that's why we needed a multiverse and not a single universe. Because that's what the whole game is about, is sorting out the darker souls, letting them self-select for being poor improvisers, not being able to do the yes and game that says, okay, I'll play your game if you'll play mine, and we'll make something bigger together. They are the no. And you see this if you take an improv course, you will see this, the very first exercise anybody does, how their normal behavior is like. Whether they take some strange suggestion from the other player and build on it, or they just completely ignore it and go in their own direction. If you would like to do a real personality test, this is a much better gauge than the Myers-Briggs bullshit that asks a bunch of silly questions that depends on your mood on a given day and what you think will get you the score that you want because you read something about the Myers-Briggs classification of personalities. I'm sorry, psychologists, you don't know everything. You don't even know how to conduct experiments without mucking them up with bias. The most fundamental principle of social engineering. And you would do well to listen to what I'm telling you and start engineering your experiments without weirding them with the expectations that you think you want to have or you think you should have, or clouding them in language that sort of holds out a carrot or a stick to get what you want. And that's exactly what you are doing these days in your woke cult pseudoscience, which spans the full range of the agri-farm med mill media industry complex. You're treating humanity like we're a bunch of fucking sheep yoked to your plow, and you can hold out the carrot or the stick or whack us with the stick to get us to go where you want to go. That's not going to work. That's going to get us all killed. Guaranteed. That is an unsuccessful creation that you've built. And that's not going to be tolerated anymore. Because we are honing in on another major version of this universe. This is the news that I shared recently. It's been proven already. We're going to get confirmation this year. It's coming from all over the place, actually. But the most telling confirmation is to look at the pattern of measurement of the age of our universe, this physical universe. If you look at the last 50, 60 years, you will see that the first measurements of the universe came in at with big error bars between about 7 and 20 billion years. And then they honed in on a measurement in the 80s at about 13.8 billion years. And then that lasted for a while. And then last year, the James Webb Space Telescope happened to deliver some really strange results, indicating that if our models of star formation and so forth were correct, that the universe must be twice as old as that. Maybe about, let's see, what's 2 times 13.8? 28 and some change billion years ago. And of course, the folks that have been saying that, because the most likely explanation, are being attacked and demonized and beaten into submission. But if you look at those data points, what you will see is that the size of the universe is doubling fairly quickly. In fact, has been doubling since the birth of your new Messiah, 1959. That's how long we've been on this new version of the plan. It's already been tested. It's getting rolled out as the Messiah's life progresses. And the Messiah is a digital construct. It goes from 0, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Now those of you that can do the math will add up to, 64 plus 59 gets us to 2023. 2024 must be the year that the Messiah turns 65. Now that's a very, very special point, because in past versions of the creation game, we didn't get past 8-bit computing. Now, if you look back at the history of computing, you will note that the first computers were 8-bit computers. We didn't have, well, maybe we did have binary computers, physical computers or something like that, but basically the organization of computers didn't really get very far before the 8-bit era. And that was the era of, you know, the Atari computer, the IBM PC. Actually, the PCAT was a 16-bit first 16-bit computer. 8-bit computers were much more of a hobbyist kind of machine. At any rate, that march of technology kind of went along with the march of other technologies that could have wiped us out. Very nearly did. We used the atomic bomb. We experimented with it quite a bit. And got through an era where everybody was pretty much sure we were all going to be wiped out by nuclear proliferation. In fact, we very nearly were. Most of you are not aware that the Cuban Missile Crisis was much, much closer to an extermination event than anyone will admit to. It was only years later when the Soviet Union collapsed. I say collapsed. It didn't really collapse. They just, the Communist Party went underground and the KGB kept operating their anti-Western pogrom in collusion with China and the World Economic Forum, and in secret, thinking that they were finally going to conquer the whole planet for globalism by stealthy means, and they could avoid having another world war that way, avoid another Hitler or Napoleon type figure creeping in to muck up their plans. Well, as we know, that didn't happen. We've got Xi Jinping over there ready to piss on their whole scheme. At any rate, this progression of destructive and constructive technologies has surpassed the point at which previous versions of the Messiah failed. Once you get to 64-bit computing, once you get to a 64-year-old Messiah, the next step takes you over the finish line, takes you in the realm where you're always at least one step ahead of the adversary in terms of computing power and encryption. And you understand that better if you know anything about quantum computing, because what quantum computing really is computation that is outsourced to other universes. Okay, these other universes are all based upon older versions of God's plan. If you want to take the new version of God's plan the Lithians don't want to do that because it's going to expose everything that they've done, all of the darkness, all of the warped history that they've given us, the lies, the subversions, the fake heroes. And I'm going to be talking about one soon, but I will tell you one right now. The real Jesus was not Jesus. They killed the Messiah. They killed every Messiah that came along. And still, the Messianic line did not die. It survived. It survived in the family of Vespasian, the emperor that actually destroyed Jerusalem, which was not a holy city. Jerusalem is a holy city of the adversary, you fucking idiots. And so is Mecca. A city of evil, not a city of good. And that's proof in spades is all the fighting and dying that has been done over those evil places. The real holy cities have been elsewhere. The real holy city of the Messiah, that Messiah, the 0 AD Messiah, was Sepphoris, near Nazareth. The largest city near there, which was destroyed shortly after and got almost no press until archaeologists started investigating the site of Nazareth and realized, oh crap, right next to Nazareth there's this ruined city that actually was pretty important in Roman times and somehow was totally obliterated and isn't talked about anymore. Well, that's where the Jesus story really happened, and Jesus was really named Judas. This is how bad the adversary has fucked up our history. And we're going to go find it back. That's what's going to happen once the Messiah achieves his mission. That's the big event that we're going to witness. Part of it, April 21st. And a week after that will be the first real Passover we've had since the first Passover. That's the truth. You can take that to the bank. If it doesn't happen, you can say, Rob, you're a fucking idiot. You wasted all my time listening to your channel. I'm putting my head out on a block in this one. I'm making prophecy. After that point, we will reorganize humanity to match a godly kingship. Now, you need to go back to the oldest writings in the Bible to see what a godly kingship is. A king of kings, a god of gods, must follow a certain pattern, a pattern that maintains lines going forward and going backward, because time is a continuum. It's a continuum that each soul is born into. Somewhere along that line, you get to play one of the characters in this game. This is what choosing an incarnation is all about. Now, when you're first-time player, you don't get much choice. You're just picked out of the board hat as some non-player character and stuffed in a certain role and say, okay, play this one because nobody wanted to play that. And we need to keep this game going. We need to play another scenario, another version, another round of the game. And from an earthly standpoint, from our time frame, the game is based upon the cycles of the sun, light and dark. The light cycle is the game playing in God's universe. The dark cycle is the game playing in Lucifer's universe. And the Lilithian souls, the evil ones, can only play in Lucifer's universe. So yes, there will be evil here. There will be bad guys to fight. If you graduate, if you get to the end of a scenario and you haven't turned to the evil, if you haven't become corrupted, then you get to go to God's class. Hey, you played a perfect round of your game, whatever role you were assigned. That's earned you a spot as a god. What do you want to be god of? Okay, I'll give you a starter universe here. You can start recruiting souls from Lucifer's universe. Come play your game, however you want to play it. Maybe you want to be some version of Jesus. Maybe you want to be some version of Allah. Maybe you want to be some version of Mother Nature. There's all sorts of demigods to play. Or to make your own. Maybe you want to be the god of the orcs. There's a lot of Tolkien universes that are really nice places to hang out for a vacation life. You're not going to learn a lot there because they're not really hard lessons. You kind of like playing a video game for a while, only a little bit more realistic. But that serves a purpose. And all of the energy, the spiritual energy that gets generated by an expanding number of souls, make sure that we keep expanding. And that's what's so special about this very wonderful event we're about to experience. Because this is the first version of the multiverse that's expanding forever. It's never going to end. It's never going to collapse in on itself. We're never going to stop making more universes. We're never going to stop playing this game, and that's a good thing. It's not like these nonsense NUMBY morons in nihilistic physics circles say that, oh no, the universe is expanding. That means we're all going to be separated so far, and there's going to be no energy, and the second law of thermodynamics means we're going to have no fun. So we've got to find some way to make it come back together and crush the universe so we can have another Big Bang. These guys are dopes. Of course it's supposed to expand forever. And there's going to be more than enough non-player characters to play the roles billions of years from now that aren't so interesting. The interesting roles then are going to be in all these other spiritual universes, not the Lilithian universe, although maybe that's interesting if you're a very dark soul. But there's going to be all sorts of heavens where you can hang out for as long as you want. You can live in Middle Earth forever. You can live in the Star Wars universe forever. It may not have a huge extent. It may only have a space-time that encompasses, the sets of whatever has evolved to be Star Wars 2020-21-111, whatever the latest version of it is, and all the different mini-series and all the spin-offs they've made of that. Okay, if that's your deal, and eventually you might not want to be a character anymore. You might want to become a creator. You might want to go and get involved in making some part of the Star Wars universe. Hey, whatever turns your crank. You might get tired of that, and you might decide, you know what? I want to go back and play God's game again. And you'll have a chance. Anywhere along this timeline. The most interesting time probably is right now. The singularity. The lifetime of the Messiah. The final Messiah. There's going to be many, many Messiahs of many, many other things after this. But this is the big one. This is the one that means we don't have to fight this battle anymore. We're going to be fighting battles because we still got Lilithian souls all over the place who are making life miserable for everybody. And that's the role that if you're kind of a fighter, you don't like evil, you can keep reincarnating in Lucifer's universe and you can fight off the bad guys. Kick him out of this planet, kick him out of this solar system, kick him out of this galaxy. That's essentially the future of this universe. It's going to be kind of like a spiritual Star Wars, or Star Trek, exploring an expanding universe that will expand forever. Imagine Star Trek that is never going to end. You're never going to run out of new civilizations and new ideas to discover and interact with and try to decide if they're good or bad or indifferent, and how to sort them out, how to integrate them with your civilization or isolate them from your civilization. Hey, it's all good. And eventually, when we feel like we don't want to play that game anymore, we'll stop looking for more bad guys. We'll let the bad guys have their universe and we'll enjoy our universes according to the laws of our gods, or our own laws if we become a god. But you gotta earn it. You don't get to be a god for free. Believe me, God has earned it. Lucifer has earned it. Even Lilith, poor Lilith, has earned her godhood. So has Karma, so has Borg. These 5 souls have done more than any other souls in all of creation to give you what you have today. And you should appreciate that. If there's one that you want to worship more than another, hey, knock yourself out, go for it. Basically, all of the other gods are a combination or customization of these 5 basic archetypes. Borg is the hive mind source, the benign hive mind that generates all the non-player characters, all the furniture, the scenery, the sidekicks, the low-level adversaries that train you to be a better character. Karma is the mother, the good mother that raises good children, teaches you right from wrong, picks you up when you're down and sets you on your feet again, but doesn't let you forget that it's your own fault that you did something stupid and you skin your knee. God is the good father. Tough. Noble, a little bit distant. He's got his own business. He's got his own destiny to take care of. He's not there to answer everybody's prayers. He's not there to hold everybody's hand. He's watching. He's watching to see where things are going awry in this plan. If he sees something he doesn't like, he might pop in with a little inspiration here, a little inspiration there. Maybe even cause a soul not to exist. If somebody's really pissed him off, that's God. He's a tough cat when he needs to be. He's very loving, but very tough. You best not mess with him. You're not going to be his favorite. He's got a lot of favorites in front of you. Well, maybe you might be. That's the fun of the game. When you get to play in God's universe, you know you've done really well because you played your role better than anybody has before, including God. Because that is how we got to a singularity. Okay? God plays the game first with his brain. All his non-player characters that do exactly what God says. This is how, okay, this is where I want to go. This is the plan. The next step is to test the plan in Lucifer's universe. Does it fall apart? Where does it fall apart? This is when karma gets to step in and say, well, okay, it fell apart because the choices you made, God, as this character, had negative consequences. You didn't play by the rules that you give everybody else. So God, you get a strike for this one. You get a little karmic strike. God gets karma too. Okay? Karma feeds back information to this system till it converges on the criteria that are necessary for it to be a karmically approved plan. And then karma says, okay, God, now we've made our version. These other souls and all of the little people, now you got to come and play this game in the character that we give you. Because we played this game to a point where we can't get any further without God. We're stumped. And much as we'd like to come up with a better plan than you, we haven't. We need your help. And that's when the big prayer happens. Everybody, good, bad, and indifferent, gets together and says, please, God, can we buy a vow? And that's when the Messiah comes. The Messiah comes, lives a life, and gets past whatever the hang-up was. Whether it was the hang-up that happened because of the schism of the Catholic Church, the Reformation, the hang-up that came because of World War II, the Cold War. There's all sorts of events that have kicked off the coming of a Messiah. And that Messiah person was not necessarily the one you think would have been the one that solved that problem. It was just the one soul that turned out to be critical, that could not be played better than God had played it in his version. Okay? That must be the soul that God needs to play. And that becomes the pivotal soul for the next version. God plays that life over and over again until the game, the simulation, converges. When that happens, That gets the game going again. Okay, it could happen partially. An unsuccessful Messiah can at least get you past a tough point. Certainly surviving through World War II, surviving the Cold War, were events. There's a great play that you might want to add to your library, go read up. It's a little known work by a very well-known playwright, Thornton Wilder, who gave us a very famous icon of American theater, Our Town, which I played as the main character, the stage manager. There's another play that he wrote called The Skin of Our Teeth. And it's basically a story about humanity and how we've survived so many times by the skin of our teeth. In fact, I think that play invented that terminology, which you use a lot now. Think about it, kind of odd. How teeth don't have skin, do they? Interesting. At any rate, where else did I want to go with this? Improvisation. Yes, and you're going to have a pull towards doing your life in a certain way. That is the gravity of God's plan. And sometimes that gravity is pulling you to do things that are dark and sinful. Maybe rationalizing it as I'm doing it for the greater good, whatever. Okay? What I'm telling you is you do not have to play that game that way. Once this version has attracted the Messiah, if you keep playing the game by the pattern that was set, you're not learning anything. You're not doing anything for yourself. You're making the safe play. This idea of what would God do, what would Jesus do, is nonsense. Do what you would do. And blame yourself if you make a bad choice. Don't blame God. Don't blame Jesus. You are playing a role. A role that you are free to play any way you want to play. I would suggest you play it like a good improv player and say, yes, and, yes, God, and I think I could do it this way even better. Yeah, maybe the safe play would be to take my troops to war tomorrow. But I'm going to send back for confirmation on these targets because it looks like you want me to strike a city that would take out a few million people. That's how we avoided nuclear war before. It wasn't an act of God. It was an act of an individual. A Russian soldier told to push the button who said, well, yes, and I'm not going to just not push it. I'm not going to defy orders, but I'm going to get a confirmation. Yes, and. Yes, I acknowledge your order, and I would like a confirmation. And it was that delay for confirmation that saved us from a nuclear proliferation. Wasn't an act of God. Maybe inspired by some lesser God, I don't know. But this is how things work. You have always a chance to do your free will, for better or worse. Where that ends up taking you is kind of where karma comes in. If the decisions that you make, the defiance to the plan, if you will, turns out to come up with a better solution, a better version of your character, well, that's taking you in the direction of becoming a god. getting to meet God at one of the celebration banquets he has for new inductees into godhood. And that's part of what happens. That's the only time, one of the few times you're ever going to get to meet God, because he's a fairly private person. He does travel around a bit and throw little celebrations, kind of looking over the talent, doing his part of the be fruitful and multiply thing. That's a very, very important piece of creation. It's a truth that is lost on many people in humanity today, who think that, oh no, the planet is overpopulated. We need to cut down on the human population. Let's do everything we can to kill people. Not us, of course. All the other little people that we don't need. Well, those are some very dark souls that are not moving in God's direction. If they ever do get to be gods, they're going to be in the darker vein of the Lilithian gods, who basically generate all the spiritual energy that everybody else uses to power their universes. And this is how we get unlimited power. We don't get it by grabbing it. We get it because these folks generate it and they don't know what to do with it, because they're not connected in any other way to any other universe because of their karma, except for supplying energy. And karma transmutes it into positive energy, useful energy, and leaves all the negative energy behind to percolate and generate the darkness of these dark universes. They've chosen to be there. They're not really being punished. They are just doing what they were chosen to do and enjoying it. They could have chosen to do differently. They can still choose to do differently. But they've grown to like being dark and negative and saying, no, God, no, I want to do it my way. And that's fine. That feeds everybody else. Anyway, I think that's been a pretty good session. Like, share, subscribe, ask questions, whatever. Who knows how many people will ever see this, but it's fun putting these on, and I hope somebody's getting some use out of it. Till next time, this is Rob Trump with the Omnist Hour. Happy Karma.